Hi, my name is Martiny. I'm a professor at UCI in oceanography. I'm a member both of the School of Biological Sciences and the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology, but I'm also a member of the School of Physical Sciences in the Department of Earth System Science. So I wear sort of different hats, and I really like to sort of mix and integrate sort of different disciplines in order to get deeper understanding of how the ocean functions. I study the ocean, this wide, open, beautiful expanse. When you get far away from the coast, you really do not see very much life. So you may think that the ocean is empty of life, but that is very wrong. As a matter of fact, underneath the surface, the ocean is teeming with life, microbial life that we also call plankton. As a matter of fact, most life in the ocean is microbial. Ocean microbial life plays some really important roles in the Earth system. First, it's the basis of life in the ocean. Phytoplankton do photosynthesis and thereby fix carbon. Therefore, we call them primary producers, because they're the bottom of the food chain. Other plankton eats them, and then they're eaten by other organisms, and so forth, and we end up with fish. So, plankton sustains all life in the ocean. Second, when phytoplankton fix carbon, they contribute to what we call the biological carbon pump. The biological carbon pump is the transfer of CO2 from the atmosphere into phytoplankton cells as they're doing photosynthesis, and when these cells then sink and die, then this carbon is transferred into the deep ocean, where it can stay for more than 1,000 years. We call this carbon storage, and the ocean capacity for carbon storage is an important regulator of climate. If we killed all phytoplankton, atmospheric CO2 would triple, with devastating consequences for all of us. Although subject to much debate, it's also been proposed that changes in phytoplankton growth can result either in the beginning or end of ice ages. A lot of the research in my lab here at UCI is to understand this biological pumping of carbon from the atmosphere into the ocean. For example, the growth of most phytoplankton is influenced by the availability of nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen. This is because phytoplankton needs a lot of different biomolecules when they build new cells and grow. For example, they need DNA and RNA and membrane lipids that has a lot of phosphorus, or nitrogen to build things like proteins, pigments, and other biomolecules. So there's an important relationship between the transport of nutrients into the sunlit surface of the ocean, where the phytoplankton grows, and the amount of carbon being fixed and transferred into the deep ocean. So my lab has spent a lot of time trying to understand this link between nutrient availability and the biological carbon pump. The exact nature of this relationship is determined by how phytoplankton uses nutrients to build new cells. So phytoplankton has been around for billions of years, so they had a long time to deal with nutrient stress. And what has happened is that some cells have evolved and adapted to differences in availability. And for example, some organisms have become frugal with some nutrients if they're in a low supply, and thereby become more competitive. For example, specific lineages in phytoplankton deals with phosphorus stress by substituting the phosphorus that's present in most organisms' membranes with some sulfur groups, which is readily available in the ocean. Or, for example, by having a small genome. So in my lab, we're studying how phytoplankton living in different parts of the ocean adapts and evolves to have unique cell chemistries in response to nutrient limitation. And if we go then back to what I talked about before with the biological pump, this work is crucial for understanding exactly what is the maximal capacity that phytoplankton have for taking up carbon. For example, if they need less nutrients in a particular environment, maybe they can take up more carbon despite being quite stressed by this particular nutrient. Also, when phytoplankton evolve and changes the genome in response to differences in environmental stress, this is basically the molecular basis of evolution. And so my lab has developed a deep understanding of what these changes means for the cell physiology and their growth properties. So we're traveling by boat to far-flung places, and then we scoop up water, and then we sequence all the DNA that's present in this water. And then by analyzing this DNA, we can basically read out the different mutations, and that tell us then what are the particular environmental conditions that are stressful for an organism living in this particular environment. In other words, analyzing the DNA of these plankton from different places of the ocean tells us a rich story about the environment that they are experiencing, and importantly, how their growth is controlled by external environmental factors. So we can think of phytoplankton genomes as sort of like a biosensor for ocean environmental changes. So we're now in the process of visiting all major ocean regions by boat, read the DNA from all these different places to really get a deep global understanding of how the growth of plankton is regulated in our current ocean. A major motivation of my research is also to understand how phytoplankton and their carbon and the biological carbon pump will be affected by climate change. Marine life is already experiencing changes like warming temperature and less nutrients, and these changes will likely only get larger in the future. As the ocean heats up, most phytoplankton will receive less nutrients due to a slowdown in the mixing of the ocean. And this is quite stressful. However, on the other hand, warming and warmer temperatures tends to stimulate growth of most organisms. So we have these two competing factors. Our system models and sort of traditional research have tend to emphasize the effect of nutrient stress. However, several recent studies from our lab using tools like machine learning have suggested that actually plankton have an adaptive capacity that's quite amazing, making them really resilient to nutrient stress. And actually this increase in temperature has actually led to improved growth in some ocean regions. So maybe phytoplankton are less sensitive to some of these ocean changes that we previously thought. On the other hand, as I mentioned, the ocean changes are only getting larger, so perhaps there's sort of an intermediate response where phytoplankton can adapt and be resilient to ocean changes, but then in the future we may see a breaking point. And so sort of to understand how will phytoplankton be affected by climate change in the short term, where all these adaptation and responses may be important, versus maybe in the future, what are sort of ultimately going to happen to the ocean. These are sort of big outstanding questions that we're trying to answer. So I hope to convince you that despite the really small size, and you could probably say somewhat lack of charisma, marine phytoplankton are really fascinating to study in the lab, on board of a boat, or using advanced computer models. Phytoplankton are central to marine life and how marine life will be affected by climate change, but importantly, they're also a key player in regulating the Earth system and climate itself. That is why we are so keen on understanding them and also understanding how they will respond to future changes. Thank you.